The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus spoke to the crowds. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down, and put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all this? They answered, Yes. And he said to them, Therefore every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household, who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. The Gospel of the Lord. Is there anything happening right now, or any area in your life right now, where you don't have a wholehearted yes to give to God? It doesn't have to be anything dramatic. It could be something actually very small, known only to you and God. It could be something that, in the end, you'll make the right decision, and you even want to, but right now, you just don't. What does it take to give a wholehearted, unconditional yes to God? At the end of my novitiate year, the first phase of formation for religious life, where candidates live as if under the vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience, which they hope to make, to discern if this is the life God is calling them to, at the end of that year, I went for an 8-day silent, individual, directed retreat to prepare for making my first vows. Each day I was supposed to meet with my assigned spiritual director to discuss whatever came up for me during prayer, and to get pointers on possible directions to explore during my times of prayer the next day. And I remember during one of those meetings, the director said to me, Today, Raphael, I want you to pray about what are your non-negotiables. And I said, Non-negotiables? What does that mean? And he said, the things that are non-negotiable for you, not up for discussion. Or maybe you can ask another question. What do I have to do before I die? I thought to myself, what a weird question. Non-negotiables. Isn't the whole point of religious life to give your whole life to God, and therefore whatever your non-negotiables are too? But looking back, I now see the wisdom of that question. The point was not whether one should or should not have non-negotiables in religious life, but what were the non-negotiables in my heart and mind at that time as I was preparing to make my first vows. And I think this is a question every single person should consider before making any kind of unconditional life commitment, whether religious vows or marriage vows or whatever. Because if we don't identify whatever conditions, spoken or unspoken, we may have, when the going gets tough, we may very well just throw up our hands one day and say, I didn't say yes to this. And we might be right. We didn't. Because it wasn't an unconditional yes, but a conditional one. And that's neither right nor wrong, it's just a fact. So, what does it take to give an unconditional, wholehearted yes to God? Our first two parables in today's gospel are a little discomforting, at least to me, because I am such a planner. My backup plans have backup plans. And so, to hear someone goes and sells all he has and buys that field, or on finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it, my instinct is to shake my head and say, bad idea. Aren't you thinking about the future? Is that really going to be enough? If that resonates at all with you, Jesus gave these parables for you and me both. You see, the point of parables is to use images the listeners understand to guide them to something they do not yet understand. And what we do not yet fully understand is that there is something so final, so total, so all-encompassing, that it can change everything. That something, Jesus tells us, is the kingdom of heaven. If you think about it, it sounds just like a person in love. A person in love will do anything, sell all for their beloved. In other words, a person in love will give an unconditional, wholehearted yes. So what does it take to give an unconditional, wholehearted yes to God? I guess it takes nothing less than being in love with God. There's a poem you may have heard before, often attributed to Pedro Arrupe, the 28th Superior General of the Jesuits, but it's actually by another Jesuit, Joseph Whalen, the former provincial of the Maryland province. And it goes like this. Nothing is more practical than finding God. That is, than falling in love in a quite absolute, final way. What you are in love with, what seizes your imagination, will affect everything. It will decide what will get you out of bed in the morning, what you do with your evenings, how you spend your weekends, what you read, who you know, what breaks your heart, and what amazes you with joy and gratitude. Fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything. I've also noticed that this is the second Sunday in a row Jesus speaks about hell in more or less the same words. So it will be at the end of the age, the angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Hell is an uncomfortable subject. But I think it would be remiss, it would be negligent and a little cowardly for me to simply pass over it in silence and pretend like it's not there. When I think of how best to understand the uncomfortable reality of hell, I think of the Inferno, the first part of that 14th century epic poem trilogy, the Divine Comedy, where the Italian poet Dante Alighieri imagines hell as composed of 9 concentric circles, increasing in wickedness the deeper you go. And at the center of hell, the 9th circle is treachery. And instead of the hottest fire we might expect, Dante has a very different image. In the 9th circle, traitors are in darkness, and partially or fully encased in ice, according to the gravity of their treachery, a symbol of the extinguishing of light and love, and that basic human warmth which betrayal necessarily extinguishes. That image has always remained with me, and I think it's a helpful way to understand what heaven and hell is and is not, because that is the subject of today's parables. If the kingdom of heaven, as Jesus tells us in the parables of the treasure hidden in the field and of the pearl of great value, if heaven is a place where the love of God is so fully present that it changes everything, we could say on the flip side that hell is simply the place where that love is so absent that it distorts everything. There really are only 2 paths in life. With each and every decision we make, we are either moving towards loving God, ourselves, and our neighbors with that wholehearted, unconditional love, or we're moving away from that. And that's really what this life is about. And so we need to pray for discernment to know the path we should take, as the young Solomon prayed in our first reading, and to trust, as St. Paul reminds us in our second reading, that God will work all things together for good for us who love Him, even if we only love Him in part right now. God will see to it that one day we will finally be able to give Him a wholehearted, unconditional yes, A yes which is not so much the entrance requirement to the kingdom of heaven as it is the very joy of heaven itself, when we will be able to love with that same love with which God loves us.